So we have a lot of brand new information to share in today's update that's actually relatively breaking and even in a lot of ways relatively good news. But hey everyone, how's it going today and welcome back to another update. So the big idea really is that Joe Manchin has now officially come out to speak and give brand new information now about what he actually physically wants inside of the package. The biggest difference is that, as most of you guys know, is for the last basically X period of time in the past, he has basically been opposing a lot of the packages and plans. This includes programs that involve putting money inside of our pockets. So that is the reason why it's not just about just general, programs about giving money away, but things that are actually very, very relevant to us. But the biggest difference now is that for the last couple of months, he talked a lot more about the reasons why he was very, very much against the fourth stimulus package and everything in it. The really, really big, I guess, breaking and even great news in a lot of ways is that now he's actually talking about a lot of the things that he actually physically does support. There are some brand new changes, but the big idea is that in today's update, I really just want to talk everything related to Joe Manchin because he is one of the most important political figures in terms of just getting all of these programs through just in general, and because at least we are now trying to share a much more positive and brighter upside to this. And then of course I really just want to end this maybe just wrapping up and talking about how everything as always relates to things related to just fourth stimulus checks, fourth social programs meant to put money inside of our pockets. So I know that everything is probably hopefully as relevant as we possibly can try to make it to us. So we're gonna get started, but as always, before we begin, consider smashing the like button because at least there's something hopeful today. Consider subscribing and hitting the bell for similar videos. Of course, you guys can decide as always, but it is greatly appreciated. And as always, feel free to comment any questions, personal thoughts, suggestions, opinions, or honestly just really anything at all. Always great to hear from you guys. So with that being said, let's get this video started. So maybe to just start by just sharing something that's just general information I figured maybe is insightful to know, is that once Joe Manchin did actually end up denying the original fourth stimulus package, which is now why we're working on a very revised version of it, one thing that actually did relatively happen is that it was actually found out and noted that low-key behind the scenes, once Joe Manchin denied that package, several of the GOP Republicans actually ended up surprisingly or just interestingly paying Joe Manchin for what he essentially did, essentially donating money to his political action committee. I do know is that this was just something I figured that was insightful, is that of all of the Republicans that did this, probably the one that was the most influential was probably Republican Ken Ligon and his wife. Essentially, both of them collectively together donated about $10,000 to his campaign, and they both also happen to be huge mega donors, so they're multi-millionaires, so they can easily give away thousands and thousands of dollars. But beyond that is that they are pretty much the two politicians that were the most influential, but it actually applied to several GOP Republicans that ended up actually rewarding and giving and donating money to Joe Manchin for what he essentially did, for essentially making it so that the fourth stimulus package could not approve. And that's the biggest thing, originally at least. Now, when it comes to just what's going on now with the package, is that they are now officially trying to take the package again. They're trying to revise it, as most of you guys know. We don't have official details about what is in that new revised package yet because they are still working on it. What we do know is that there are also several other people in Congress that are now coming out. The great news is that it is back on the table. They did confirm that they're starting or restarting to work on it once again. There are different politicians that have come out to speak. We did talk about a couple of them in the last video, so I'll put that at the very, very end screen, such as about how AOC has been kind of attacking everything that's been going on. So we won't talk as much because that's in the other video. I do know, for example, maybe one just general side is that Ro Khanna did also recently speak, and I guess this is the newer side of it, is that there are several politicians like Ro Khanna that is essentially now officially kind of caved caved in the sense is that now they're really just trying to, they've basically announced or just basically expressed that at this point, because they know that there's a lot of difficulties, they're pretty much just willing to support whatever Joe Manchin ends up ultimately supporting, because they do know at this point he does hold a lot of power in what we can definitely be able to go through. And I think the great news is, at least at this time, he's now talking about the upside to what he actually physically wants inside of this package. Which probably now leads us to the actual next point about what that something is, and it was essentially released right here. So the big idea what's happening is that Joe Manchin has now officially expressed that the big thing what he really actually genuinely supports, interestingly, within the fourth stimulus package is a lot of the programs that revolve around things such as like the environment. So for example, like climate change, clean energy, and this is actually something, or these are basically policies that actually both sides, or basically almost all of the sides, essentially support. Joe Biden definitely supports it because he, of course, wrote the package. Joe Manchin has now officially said that he also supports this particular plan. And while this is maybe something that is only relevant to technically, it is actually very important to almost all of us, but I know that not a lot of people follow climate stuff. But there is an impact to how this is going to impact things like fourth checks and social programs. And that is the part I think that almost every single person actually does care about. But maybe to run through the general specifics about what he actually supports, or what this specific part of the policy is that essentially what it's hoping to do is to try to transition from using a lot of the current sources of energy that we have, such as like about fossil fuel, and now trying to change it to now promote things like wind and solar. So essentially just cleaner, renewable, and better, cheaper, and more environmental forms of creating energy. They're hoping to dedicate about $500 billion to this. So it's going to be essentially about 1/4 of what the original fourth stimulus package has. That's the amount of money that they're really hoping to try to dedicate to putting inside of this program. This will also involve things such as like reducing carbon footprint, everything around that world. And I think how this is actually important to us, specifically related to the environment, is that the big goal I think behind all this is that they're really just also trying to help with things such as like helping with things related to just natural disasters. So everything related to like wildfires, hurricanes, storms, and back then, for basically actually technically the last years and years, but just particularly lately, we have seen a lot of cases of people that have been losing their homes or have been basically going through something because of things like weather, floods, natural disasters. Feel free to share if you guys have any particular stories at all. But that's the real significance to why this is actually really important, how this not just impacts us on just being able to enjoy life in general, but even on an economic level, because it was a very financially difficult thing for a lot of people that had to go through that over the last just years and years of history. But again, particularly very recently with everything that's happening in our environment right now. But maybe now to move about how this actually is going to impact things related to actual fourth stimulus social programs. So things like checks, social security, child tax credit, healthcare, everything that involves about just money in general, is really about the fact that the really good news is that now that we do have a much clearer idea about what Joe Manchin wants and actually physically supports, what this really means is that now that we're trying to create a brand new fourth stimulus package, it means that we can really now try to target this package to try to find some level of compromise between what he wants and what so basically the rest of Congress wants and what's been going on. Because beforehand, we didn't really know what Joe Manchin wants. So as a result, because of that, it's very difficult to please someone if the person doesn't even know what they particularly want. It's kind of like trying to sell something to a customer or a date, but then sometimes the person you're talking to doesn't actually physically even know what they actually want. So you kind of have to take chances at, hoping that maybe something that you show them is going to make them happy. But the big idea is that now that Joe Manchin has expressed that, what this essentially means is that they're now going to try to create a package, but hopefully if we can create some kind of package that does have what Joe Manchin does want, maybe we can find some kind of compromise that, hey, Joe Manchin, maybe you don't necessarily support this, but we'll tell you that what? If you support this plan, we will give you a plan that you maybe actually do support. And at the end of the day, a lot of these plans, such as like child tax credit, I think it's important to maybe clarify is that it's not that he doesn't necessarily support these programs in general. He just doesn't support the specifics of these programs. So essentially, like, he wants to raise the requirements, make it a lot more targeted, make it a lot more niche, really focus in on certain groups of people. And I think the goal is that if they're able to try to find common ground, now that they do have a much clearer idea about doing other programs, again, going back, how this is relevant to us is that, families can potentially be getting over $3,000. I did make a video about how past families, some people, if you by any chance happen to be a family and, have kids, there was a video that I made about how some families might potentially be and this is something that was already approved, by the way, about how some families might be able to potentially get between $3,000 to even $5,000. But I'll put that video at the very, very end screen on the bottom part. But the idea is that all of these programs, child tax credit is a couple $1,000s. Social Security is another potential couple $1,000s. All of these programs combined can really make a big impact. Even if it's things like giving states funding and money, which many states are actually discreetly now using to create their own kinds of stimulus checks. This is something that, while Joe Manchin might not support, he can support funding and aid, and then the actual states, like the representatives in the particular states, can use that funding and then decide what they do with it, and then this would include the actual social programs. But of course, beyond this, we really just have to wait to see what happens. So that's what I really just wanted to share in today's update. So if you guys found that relatively insightful, hopefully, as always, consider smashing the like button if you guys haven't done so. Huge thanks if you guys already did. As always, feel free to subscribe, consider subscribing if you're interested in similar videos, and feel free to comment any questions, thoughts about, honestly, just anything. So that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. As always, stay safe, stay well. Hope everyone had a great weekend. If you're watching this on release day, and to see you guys next time. Thank you guys so much again.